Hey yo, what is going on guys? Cash and Clean here, and for today's video I just wanted to talk about how you guys can farm some rune fragments, because it's going to be very tricky, especially if you're trying to get the rune anvil done. And I talked about the rune anvil guide in my previous video. I'll link that in the description, and then I'm going to go over some rune crafting stuff. So if you want a guide on how to actually finish this thing, or how to get the resources, or how to do any of this stuff, like how to even get to the max level portion, then I'm going to leave a link to that in the description as well. But for now, we're just going to talk about rune fragments and how to farm that stuff. Starting things off, when you go to the runecrafting bench, you're going to notice a couple of things here. We have blank runes and then metallic runes. So the metallic ones we're going to come back to later, but they're pretty important because the rune breaks every time you take damage. We don't have to worry about the 2% light or the other buff that it gives you. The main thing is getting the fragments, because every time these runes break, you get fragments. So that's what you want to do. So you want to avoid using things like this unbreakable rune. So starting things off, you want to go to the dabbler tab and craft some of these blank runes. I already mentioned it, but we're going to come back to the metallic rune later and I'll tell you why. But you want to do this blank rune stuff, and then once you unlock the further tab, so once you get to the runic master, you're going to want to craft these empty runes. So the empty rune and the blank one do the same exact thing, except you get a little bit more fragments with the empty rune. From what I've tested, you just get a little bit extra. And then there is the one better one, the depths rune. It does the same thing, but you get a little bit more fragments, but it's a little bit more costly to make, so I don't really recommend it. Like, getting the runic essence is going to be pretty difficult, especially if you don't farm trunks. And I'll talk about how to farm trunks in a different video. If you don't know what that is, that's basically going to be these boxes over here, which contains all of the long shade resources. Apart from the plants you're going to have to farm on your own. But anyway, you want to make it to this portion, craft the empty runes, equip it to your auto use spot. You're going to lose some light if you end up using them because your food spot's going to be gone, which doesn't really make sense to me. I feel like food should be there along with your auto use spot, maybe like something else, but it's kind of whatever at this point. And just in case you don't have this in your club or wherever, you can go to the hub and you can go over here in this area. We have the anvil and the runecrafting bench. So I want to talk about something in the anvil real quick. If you go through this direction over here, this is going to be the hardened rune buff. And what that means is that normally whenever your rune breaks, you have to wait an entire minute before your other one can break. So you can't constantly break your runes to get a bunch of fragments. So it's like on a cooldown. And whenever you unlock these nodes, it lowers the duration to 53 seconds, this one to 46, and then this one all the way down to 40 seconds. Now that's helpful and all, but the main thing that you do want to go for is this one over here. This will allow you to get rune fragments in the depths delve biome. Now this is going to be the best way to get rune fragments until you can reach this point over here. And I'm going to talk about this in a second. But basically, whenever your rune breaks, you get additional rune fragments. And I'll talk about a pretty good method with this one, but as far as everything goes, the best way to get rune fragments is from delves. And whether you like it or not, whether how terrible they are, you're gonna have to farm them. And you can see footage on screen right now. Basically, the idea is you go into 170, you can start it a little bit higher, but the depths delve starts at 170, and then from 170 you can go to 181, and then if you start at 171, you can go to 182, so something like that. And what you want to do is, when you go into the delve, you want to fight every single enemy that you can, or pretty close to it. You'll get the objective done, most likely, assuming you're fighting all the enemies. And the main thing that you guys should be doing in there is just fighting all the enemies. Now, you guys should definitely avoid the clams, because they will one-shot you. It'll slow down your run a lot, and it's just super annoying to deal with, especially if you don't one-shot. And at this point in the game, we can't really one-shot. Unless you have a massive group of like at least 8 people, max light, then you could potentially do it. So if you don't have a really good group, I just recommend skipping them. And then you might run into some ranged enemies. Those things will delete your flasks one by one. Especially if you don't have death defying, you'll just get one-shot instantly. So I recommend skipping those as well if you can. But in the meantime, I want you guys to fight almost every single enemy in those delves. And on average, I was able to get 1,000 fragments every hour or so. And I was constantly running in groups. And the groups kind of differed. I would always get different people. Sometimes I wouldn't even get a max amount of people. Sometimes I would get people that didn't even have max light and they're just like 20k power rank. So if you want to invite people to these delves, what I found is kind of useful is that if you go over to the long shade biome, you can go over there and then you can just straight up put down your delve portal. And then I would just recommend setting it to whatever depth you want to farm at. So I'll just click ready and then hit X. So it'll show 170 right there. And what you want to do from here is invite people that say they have enough light to do this delve. Ideally, you want 12k plus, or you can find someone with 10k plus. But the more light the people have, the better. And the thing that I was getting at here is that if you're inviting someone and they claim they have max light, and if you invite them here, it might say that they don't have enough power rank or enough light. So that way you can tell if they're lying or not. But sometimes that's not the case. Some people actually might have a good amount of light, but they might not meet the power rank requirements, or maybe they're off by like a little bit of light. But just in case you want to get like super maxed out endgame players, you can just go to this biome and then start inviting people, and if they can't make it to this biome, then chances are they didn't have enough light or they lied, or in the rare circumstance that they just couldn't make it to the biome but they have the light. So with all that said, farming rune fragments is pretty slow. You'll need a ton of rune fragments, but that's going to be the best way to do it, and eventually you're going to want to get this node over here unlocked. And the cool thing about having this one unlocked is that you're going to have this one unlocked too. So every time your rune breaks, you're going to get essence. Now it's going to be 1 essence, but it's better than nothing. At least you're getting essence. And you're going to need this for the mastery stuff, and you'll need this for the new dragons. So the thing that I was talking about with this node specifically, where you get extra rune fragments. So if you have some of the metallic ones, so every time you take damage, your rune breaks. I'll just equip it real quick just to show you guys. So I'm going to go to Uber 1 real quick, aka Fey Forest. And basically, while you have it equipped, all you want to do is go up to a random enemy, doesn't really matter which one. And as you can see, I got 6 rune fragments along with an abyssal essence. So the reason why I had you get that node specifically is because every time your rune would break, you would only get 1, sometimes maybe, very rarely you get 2. So at least with this method, you can have the enemy hit you. The one thing though is that they will die if you have certain empowered gems that will kill them. So to fix this, what you want to do is unequip the ones that will kill them. So in my case, I have Mired Mojo. This is basically every time I take damage, it'll essentially just kill the enemies. So we're just going to unequip that. And the reason why I went to Uber 1 is because every time they do damage to me, I just gain the health back instantly. So I'm just going to go over to this enemy over here, and I crashed. Okay, so the enemy returned. As you can see, the enemy is doing damage to me, but I'm not taking any damage. My health regen is so high up that it doesn't even matter. And as you can see, we got 4 rune fragments. It's really terrible, but this is probably the best way to do it if you want to just like eat food, have YouTube on your other monitor. If your mom does shopping, maybe you can help your mom with the groceries, come back here, and then check every few minutes to make sure you're taking damage, or a spider just walks into the Wi-Fi and just shuts it off completely. Either way, this is what you want to do, and every time the hardened effect runs out, any second now, your rune will break here, so I'll just give it a second, and there we go. So it's not going to be instant, but it will happen. That time I just got 3. Alright, so I waited for the cooldown to go down to 0, so I'm kind of curious on how much I'll get this time, but it should be more than 2, I would imagine. If it's not more than 2, then that's going to be super terrible, but there we go. So we get 3. So at minimum, you should be getting 3. And the cool thing about that is you can kind of just cycle through these. So it'll take 1 rune fragment to craft them. I don't know why my bench is up there. So if you go to the Dabbler tab, Metallic Rune, you just need 1 rune fragment to craft it. So you can craft a bunch of these, and then at least you'll be making rune fragment progress. And that's just if you want to like eat food and kind of just relax, have YouTube on the side, and then check Trove every so often. It's not like a super fast method or anything. But if you happen to be in like a 5-star farm, for example, you could theoretically, you can craft that rune if you want to, because you'll most likely be taking damage. Or you can just craft the empty runes and then just do dungeons, aka the 5-star dungeons. So if you find a host doing them, they might advertise it in your club. Or if you're in the Longshade biome, maybe they can advertise it in the world chat. And every time you get invited to the actual 5-star dungeon, you guys can complete it super fast. And then make sure you craft a bunch of keys, because you will be making profit on your key fragments. So you can keep doing 5-star dungeons over and over, whereas with delves, you don't make enough profit. So with that part, it's a little bit annoying. So you want to do more 5-star dungeons for those key fragments. And then once you get enough, you can convert those to delve ones, and then you can go back to farming delves. And yeah, that's basically the gist of it. I went to Uber 1 for the example just because it was easier for me, but whatever situation that you guys are in, you can just go to whatever Uber that you want to, or difficulty, wherever makes sense to you, wherever you're just not going to die. The metallic rune method isn't going to be super fast, but as you're doing stuff in Trove, just make sure you have runes equipped, because every time they break, they will give you fragments, and that's what you want to go for. So if you're not necessarily farming delves, if you're farming for something completely different, so if you're doing like gem farming, or maybe you're farming Ifera for the permatorches and delves, or whatever the case may be, just make sure you have specific runes for whatever you're doing. And if you want to use those empty runes, they do work in delves, so I do recommend that. And the final thing I'll say is make sure you have the appropriate ally equipped. They won't give you rune fragments, but they will give you other benefits. So we have Engiro, this gives you Depths Core and Soul Adepts every time you defeat creatures in the Delve biome. So I highly recommend trying to get this thing. It's not going to give you a ton of Depths Core or Soul Adepts, but at least it's something as you're farming the rune fragments. It's not super easy to get, it's not super easy to craft. You have to go to you'll want to find this ship over here, which contains the anvil and the Runecrafting bench. But the thing that I was talking about is Engiro, which is over here. It's going to be pretty difficult to craft, but I will talk about a method of farming the trunks so you can get these resources down here. And then as far as the plants go, you're gonna have to wait for that in the rotation whenever that comes around. So I will leave a link in the description down below, which will talk about the rotation for your current time zone. So if you're trying to find a specific biome, then maybe you can find it at a specific time on the website. I talk about this in my Runecrafting guide, so if you're a little bit confused on what I just said, then you can refer to that. But basically, you can just see at what time a certain biome will appear, and then you can just log on Trove, farm the plants, and that's how you would get the other resources here. And then as far as the other stuff here, there is a pack in the store. If you go to the Styles tab, it's going to be the Chummy Chums pack. It'll do the same thing as these ones over here. These will give you essence, although the only difference is that this will give you the 1% magic find, whereas these will give you 50 less light, but it'll give you a damage bonus. So there's one for physical damage and one for magic damage. And they have this for, I just crashed again. I was going to say that they have it for each essence. So if you want to have that equipped while you do dungeons, delves, or whatever the case may be. So if you don't have Ngiro, maybe you have one of the other ones so you can farm essence. And then once you get Ngiro, then you can have that equipped while you do delves. You'll get 350 light instead of the 450 that we can currently get, but that's how things are at the moment. So hopefully all of that made sense. If you have any questions, drop it down in the comments down below. I'll be sure to answer that for you. And unfortunately, delves are going to be the best way to get Rune Fragments at the moment until some other update comes out where something else makes it a little bit better to farm. But in the meantime, that's all we got. But anyway, thank you all so much for listening, watching, viewing, and subscribing, and I will talk to you all later.